the world's coolest pastor? You guys have not seen many pastors.
You are our first one.
Yeah. Rooted's coolest pastor, yeah. I had a friend of mine in my previous church who left a mug on my desk that said the world's okayest pastor. So I was like, well, thank you for that. So that felt really good today to get that. I've been living with the world's okayest pastor for years now. All right, we're going to turn to Scripture today. I'm going to read to you from Genesis chapter 29. Let me make sure I've got it all here. Yep. So we're going to start. We're actually going to jump 3 sections that we're going to read together. So we're going to kind of put together a piece of the story in Scripture. So I'll read it aloud to you, and you can follow along. So when the Lord, this is from chapter 29, so it's really the continuation of a couple weeks ago. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." Let's go to the next slide. She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, for she said, "The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son." Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, "Surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons." Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, "Now I will praise the Lord." And then she stopped having children. This is chapter 30 now. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." And then Jacob became furious with Rachel. "Am I God?" he asked. "He's the one who has kept you from having children." Jumping ahead in chapter 30. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant, gave birth to a son. "God has removed my disgrace," she said. And she named him Joseph, for she said, "May the Lord yet add another son to my family." And that should not be there. Sorry about that. Well, we've been in the story of Jacob. I don't know if you've spent much time, if you remember reading in Genesis through Jacob's story, if you remember like, wow, that's a crazy story, or that's a messed up man. So we're about halfway through Jacob's story in this summer series. If you haven't been along with us, Jacob is one of the pillars of the Old Testament. The patriarchs is what we call them. And so one of the ones whom the promises of God would flow through. And the surprise twist in the story comes right up front, because when we hear the idea that God's blessing or promise is going to flow through somebody, you're like, oh, he's found a godly man, right? A man of high character. That's what we assume, right? Because those are the kinds of people that God gives his blessing to. So kind of the twist right up front in the story is that is not how people would refer to Jacob as a godly man or a man of character. He was quite the opposite of that. He was a manipulative man. He was a man who found ways to get ahead and took advantage of others. He had no issue whatsoever with bending the rules, outright cheating, lies, deceit. If that worked to his advantage, then that was the way he was going to play it. As with anybody who chooses to do life that way, we would not be surprised to find that he burned some bridges along the way, right? We use the picture of the wrecking ball. That's our icon for this series. Like, he brought the wrecking ball to his family. And so when you do life like he did it, it's really inevitable. It's not surprising how that turned out, because who here likes it when you get cheated? Like, who of you feel like that was okay when you got deceived? Who of you feels like when you get taken advantage of, well, he played that well, right? Like, that's not how we see that. Like, there's a sense of outrage. There's a sense of injustice. There's a sense of, who do you think you are? And so it's not surprising that as he plays life this way, that he does a lot of damage and destruction, because it turns out people don't love being taken advantage of. In fact, the immediate issue he began to face after his last one was his brother Esau, who didn't love to be manipulated and made it his commitment to kill Jacob. That's their family dynamic. I don't know what yours is, but I bet it's not that. And so, turns out, his brother is one of the many people who doesn't like to get played. And so, he didn't appreciate the latest deception, and it's not the first one. And so, Jacob, after pulling off getting the blessing, right? Like, huge win, or was it? Because he finds himself fleeing for his life. He finds himself on a journey alone. So, he had family, but now he's alone. He had people to share with, but now he doesn't. He had people to talk with, but now he doesn't. He had people to do life with, but not now. He finds himself on a long journey alone. And if you can imagine then, like, so here's how we put it, like your junk is smoldering in the distance. Like that you just, the mess you created is smoldering in the distance as you walk away, and you're left to ponder as you walk alone. I don't know if that played out how I was imagining that was going to play out. Like somehow in the moment, we don't see in our sin that there's going to be something smoldering behind us. So Jacob has a long walk. Turns out it's about 500 miles, his walk. He's making a journey to his uncle in Haran. And so he takes this 500-mile journey. That's a lot of time to think, a lot of time to ponder what if and what have I done, those kinds of things. And so he's going to a family member, an uncle in Haran, and he's hoping while he's there he can also find a wife. What is interesting, and if you were with us a couple weeks ago, you saw how this all played out. So Jacob, like, he's the manipulator. He's the con man, right? But he finds himself on the other side of deceit. So he would soon discover that his uncle Laban knows a thing or two about deceit. He's a fairly accomplished manipulator himself. And so Jacob would get to kind of sit on the other side of the table, right? So he's always sat in the chair of the manipulator, the con man, the one running the con. And now he finds himself on the other side of the table where he's being manipulated, where he's being conned, where he's the one being taken advantage of. As you can imagine, he feels like the rest of us, like, yeah, I don't like that seat. But it's an interesting perspective for him, right? To find himself on the other side. Potentially a place of growth, as you get to sit in the seat of the one who got taken advantage of. He would begin to learn some lessons from sitting in that other seat of this is how it plays out on the other side. So if you recalled a couple weeks ago, here's how Laban manipulated him. He had 2 daughters. So he's got Rachel and Leah. We read about them this morning. It's kind of sad, like, to read that, isn't it? Especially about Leah. So he's got 2 daughters. The older one is Leah. The younger daughter is Rachel. And Jacob immediately falls in love with Rachel. And what we read as the brief description is basically Rachel was beautiful, stood out, and he loved her. And Leah was ordinary. Like, nothing special, and that was not the one he had wanted to marry. And so he makes a deal with Uncle Laban that can I marry your daughter? And Laban says, no problem. All you have to do is work for me for 7 years. And he was happy to do it. Like, okay, like that is a bargain right there to get Rachel as my wife. And so he works for these 7 years. And then when it comes to the final, thing where they're going to consummate the marriage, he doesn't get Rachel. Jacob brings Leah. Leah was not the one that he loved, not the one they had agreed on, and he expresses his outrage immediately. Like, what have you done to me, bringing Leah instead of Rachel? Which you can understand from his standpoint, like, oh, okay, that was pretty dirty. But you can also understand from Leah's standpoint, while she will carry this issue of wanting to be loved, right? And so Jacob, for his part, he cannot believe that Laban has just done this to him. Like, you deliberately deceived me. Like, it's indecent. It's unreasonable. It's dishonest. It's disrespectful. Who does stuff like that? Right? It's like this weird irony because he's sitting in the other chair and he can feel the outrage of like, who does this? But he does this, right? So in the end, Jacob winds up with Leah as his wife, and then he gets Rachel as well. It's going to cost him a little bit more. So he's going to have to work 7 more years in order to marry the one he originally agreed to marry. So first 7 years were for the daughter you didn't want. The next 7 years will be for the daughter you do want. And so, like, you read the whole thing, you're like, that is so messed up, right? Like, on a whole bunch of different levels, from a whole bunch of different angles. Like, that is a wreck right there. And so he marries 2 daughters of Laban's daughters. And, well, you would not be surprised to know that presented a few challenges, right? So we read about some of that this morning. So perhaps you've heard the phrase happy wife, happy life. And kind of the other part of that is unspoken is unhappy wife, make her happy, right? And so here's what you've got. You've got a man with 2 unhappy wives. That doesn't cover that one. Now what? And so Jacob is trying to figure out how to make these 2 sisters, these 2 wives, happy. So they're unhappy for different reasons. Leah, she's unhappy because she's unloved, and we read about that this morning. It's like she is desperate to be loved, and every time she has another child, she's like, maybe now he'll love me. Like, it's really sad to read, isn't it? Rachel, for her part, has no doubt that she's loved, but she is unable to have children, and so she keeps looking at Leah and being like, why can't I have children? And so here's what's going on in the whole dynamic is Leah has something Rachel desperately wants, and Rachel has something Leah desperately wants. See Jacob's dilemma? So the end result is a family full of jealousy and resentment. Leah desperate to be loved, Rachel hoping to have a child. Every time her sister has a child, it just reinforces the wound and the emptiness. Every time Rachel gets the attention, it reinforces the wound and the loneliness of Leah. And this is their life. It's a difficult family dynamic, right? And so thank you, Uncle Laban, for all of this with these 2 unhappy wives and lots of brokenness. Both of these women feel helpless to change their situation. Leah doesn't know what she has to do to be loved. Rachel doesn't know what she has to do to be able to have children. Both are resentful of the other. both are looking to Jacob to somehow fix what's wrong, and Jacob is overwhelmed by the whole drama. Now, weird dynamics, right? There's a whole lot going on that we don't relate to, the two wives things. But there is stuff that we do relate to, right? Like the idea of brokenness, looking at other people and saying they have what I should have. Envy, resentment, dysfunctional family. Anybody? And so here's what I want us to see. One of the things kind of midway here. Like, this is a messed up family. And it's not the kind of family we look at and say, that's the kind of family God blesses. Right? Those are the ones we point to and say, well, hopefully someday they'll get their act together. Maybe God can redeem that. Like, that's how we tend to view it. And so it's really interesting. Like, you look at this messed up, dysfunctional family, and God chooses to bless. Now, it doesn't look like it right now, does it? But we'll see as it plays out. But here's what I want to encourage you with. I don't know what your family's like. I don't know what your story is. I know pieces of it. But we all carry brokenness. We all carry things that are wrong. I mean, as I've gotten older, and I realize, yeah, my children are going to need some therapy because of how I parented, maybe, right? Like the brokenness that we've imposed on them. And yet, I know they're going to impose brokenness on their kids. Like, we don't know any other way. And so how encouraging is it to, like, read about this family where you just shake your head and say, wow. And then you discover, and this family has God's blessing. And you're like, wow, not sure I saw that coming. So some of all of this, like you see how this all plays out. So there's a part of us that can look at all of this and say, I mean, Jacob kind of got what he deserved, right? Like, he did some things and he's kind of living in the results of it. And so this is how life works, right? You make your choices and you live with the consequences of those choices. So some of what he's got, he's reaping what he sows. But some of what he got was not his fault. Some of what he got was, we could say, imposed or dumped. Some of his headaches are earned, and some of them were not. But they're headaches still, even though they come from someone else. And here's the other thing I want us to see, like in the big picture of how we do life. So we all get the same kinds of things. So we get the stuff that we've done, that we reap what we sow, right? So you can make the direct connection. I mean, I did that, I got that. That's how that plays out. But then we also get the stuff that I didn't do. The stuff that was done to me or against me. The stuff that you have to find a way to live with that was dumped into your life. And again, here's what I want us to see. Like, here's the beauty of Jacob's story that we can sit with. That we get to see, one, God's sovereignty, and two, God's grace in the middle of all of that. And that is true for you and me. We get to see in the mess you create and the mess that's dumped in your life, God's sovereignty and grace in all of that. We could say amen there and be done, but we're not. Because I want us to press into a little bit more of Jacob's story here. And you're going to start to see God's care in the mess of it all. So we read in chapter 30 that God finally remembered Rachel. It's such an interesting way to put that, right? But it's putting it from the human standpoint. Like sometimes it feels like God has forgotten us. And so it describes it from the perspective that we might have. And then God remembered, like, oh yeah, you wanted a child. So then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant, gave birth to a son, and she said, God has taken away my disgrace. And she named her son Joseph. And that said, may the Lord add another son. So Rachel finally has her son, has her child. And it's shortly after this that the story starts to change, because now Jacob decides, you know what, I've done enough with Uncle Laban, and I'm kind of ready to move on, which I would have felt after year 7, right? And maybe before. But now he's done 14, and it's going to turn out he's going to do several more years as the drama plays out. And so he's ready to take his family and go. And so here's what we read, that after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way. So he's talking to his uncle now. Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and I'll be on my way. You know how much I have done for you. So Jacob's perspective, we're done here. I'm done with your drama. Done with your silliness. I am ready to get out of here. And just to add weight to his request, notice his line, you know how much work I've done for you, which I want you to notice this line, because Jacob's MO has not been working hard. His MO has been finding a way to not work hard and take advantage. And so it's interesting for him to be able to say, you know, I've worked hard for you. Or if you read between the lines, you know how you've taken advantage of me, but you can't say that I haven't been a man of character and done my part. Wow, Jacob, look at you. I've given you 14 years, right? The agreement was 7. I've given you 14 years, and I've worked hard for those 14 years. You deceived me, so that cost me an extra 7, but I have worked hard even still. But now it's time. And Laban said, this is one of my favorites. Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. You cannot be serious. What are you talking about? You may find it surprising to know that you do not have any favor in my eyes. And you cannot be serious even asking this. Like, it's so strange to even read. Laban like, hey, we've really worked well together here. This has been good for us. Like, if you've enjoyed this as much as I have, stick around. And so here's Laban like trying to schmooze him like, hey, this has been really good, right? No, it hasn't. And so like, just recount his story. Like, if I found favor, well, you deceived me on my wedding night after 7 years of work. You did offer me the daughter we agreed to, but that cost me another 7 years. By the way, your girls hate each other and bicker constantly. So there's that, right? Like, it's just funny to even, like, how could he say this? But isn't this life? Like, how we can, in our blindness or in our slanting of things, like, it's been a good 14 years. So here's what's interesting, though. Here's what I want you to see. Jacob definitely doesn't like being around Laban, because he's been taken advantage of the whole time. But Laban likes having Jacob around. And it's not just about the free labor. He genuinely wants Jacob to stay because the last 14 years have worked out really well for him. And again, not just with free labor. See, here's what Laban knew. Even though he's a manipulator, a schemer, he knew this, that the reason why he has thrived in these last 14 years is because God was blessing Jacob. Like his flock and his family had grown. He was much wealthier than when he started 14 years ago. And he knew that God's blessing on Jacob was the reason why. So he knows he's got a good thing going here. Like if Jacob stays, I get to benefit from God's blessing on Jacob's life if I can talk him into staying. And so he's struggling to talk him into it, so he kind of finds a way to make it as difficult as it might be. He says to Jacob, I know, this is Laban saying, I know the Lord has blessed me because of you. So you just name your wages and I'll pay them. Now, if you're Jacob, you're like, yeah, I bet, right? I don't believe that for a second. Jacob reminds him once more, so again, you know how hard I have worked for you, how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. So they both see it now. Laban sees it, and Jacob sees it. But Jacob's like, but we're going to finish this. So here's what he proposes. Here's the wages that I'm going to accept to work a little longer before I leave. I'm going to continue to care for your flocks, and I'm going to start to build my own flock. So here's the agreement. My wages will be all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to keep the majority of the sheep. You keep the solids. And I'll take the minority of the sheep, the spotted and speckled, and so then you'll be able to tell which ones are yours and which ones are mine. And if you see the solids mixed in with my spots and speckleds, then you're like, wait a minute, that's mine. And this will be easy to sort out, right? Simple. Solids, not solids. So Jacob is offering a solution, one that would keep everybody on the upright. Because this doesn't just work for Jacob's advantage, right? Like it also helps him keep track of Laban. Like, hey, wait, there's some spotted and speckles there. Those are mine. And so Laban jumps at the deal. And he's certain he's going to come out ahead on this one. And again, he's a schemer, he's a manipulator. And so he's going to be sure these odds work firmly in his favor. And so he immediately agrees to the deal, and here's his first move. He removes all of the spotted and speckled sheep from the fold and takes them 3 days' journey away. All right, so Jacob, in making this deal, assumes I've got a small group to start with, and hopefully that will grow. Well, now you have 0. So you're going to oversee this group of solids. From Laban's standpoint, he feels like I've just trimmed the gene pool to work in my favor. And so he's already tilting things to land in his favor and to work in his advantage. And so Jacob begins caring for Laban's flock of solids. And he's hoping that out of this comes a good group of spots and speckled. You tracking with this? So Jacob, remember, he's a schemer too. And he's got an angle he's going to play here. He knows how this works with Laban. He's already done this for 14 years, so he's not dumb. And so he knows that Laban's going to do whatever he can to work the situation in his favor. And that's confirmed immediately when he's like, and there's no specks and spotted left. Okay, here we go. So Jacob has a plan that can't miss. And I don't know if you've read Jacob's story recently, but as I've been growing up and as I've read through the Bible, this was always one of the ones I'm like, what is that? Okay, ready? So then Jacob took some fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled off strips of bark, making white streaks on them. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. And when they mated in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Genius, isn't it? Like this is one of the ones you're like, really? You put striped sticks in the water and that works in your favor. Like practically a given, right? How could they not be spotted and speckled? And Laban, poor sap, he doesn't even know that Jacob is using the striped sticks. Like, so this is one of those ones that like we read it and we're like, what is that? And honestly, it's one of the ones that if somebody's a skeptic, they'd be like, and that is why I struggle sometimes with the Bible. Now, I mean, there's some cultural stuff connected to this, but here's what we know for sure. We know that striped sticks in the watering trough will make no difference at all, right? But here's what's weird. But sure enough, there were lots of spots and speckled. And so Jacob is like, bam, striped sticks, right? And it sounds like Jacob's done it. He's worked this whole scheme in his favor by putting these striped sticks in the watering trough. And sure enough, he's got a lot of spotted and speckled. And so Jacob, you know, the guy that works things to his favor, is kind of smiling, patting himself on the back like, striped sticks. I've done it. And so, what's going on? Like, you've got two manipulators trying to figure out how to get things to work to their advantage. So Laban is shrewd, of course, but Jacob knows his way around manipulation as well. And so this, like what he's trying to do now, this is what he does. This is how he's done life. He knows how to try to selfishly manipulate, and that's what he's trying to do here. But as we read it, you're like, that makes zero sense. Like, how could the flock looking at striped branches result in spotted, speckled sheep? So did those striped sticks work? No, they didn't. And you're going to see as you keep reading that here's what we know to be true. The result was going to be the same with or without his goofy sticks. Because the reason it looked like it worked was because God blessed him. It wasn't striped branches working things to his favor. It was God's blessing working things to his favor. Made me think of a couple images. So one, I remember as my kids were young, pushing them on the swing. And you know when they get to that age when they start to realize, oh, there's a way that I move my legs that makes the swing go. And so they start to make the connection, like if you pump your legs, you can make the swing go. And so as you're pushing them, they start like wiggling their legs back and forth. And like, I'm doing it. And I just keep pushing them and let them believe that they're moving the swing, but they're not. I'm doing all of the pushing. And this is a little bit like what I think Jacob has experienced with his striped sticks. Like, I'm doing it. And God's like, okay, I'll just keep pushing you here. Here's the other image that came out. There was this really clever, 10 years ago maybe, this clever car commercial during the Super Bowl that showed up. Do you remember this one? Right, and it's this little kid that keeps running around. He's dressed as Darth Vader, and he's trying to use the Force and make things move. And so, you know, he'd come up to his dog, and he'd be like, and the dog just sits there and looks at him. He's like, you know, and then his mom gets him a bowl of cereal, and he's like trying to make the cereal come, and he's like, And so, obviously he's trying to make this thing work and nothing works. And finally his dad comes home and he winds up standing in front of the car and he's like, come on. And he's doing it. And his dad takes the remote keychain and starts up the car. And the kid's like, what? What did I just do? Right? The kid was all excited because he thought, I did it. I used the force. And his dad is just smiling back there holding the remote keychain that just started the car. And I think this is what Jacob experienced, right? Like he's like with the striped sticks, like, and God's like, okay, whatever. And so, like, it's this crazy scenario where he's trying to work things to his favor, and God's like, I'm gonna bless you anyway. Like, you don't have to do this. And so Jacob is trying to take advantage. But eventually he understood that it had nothing to do with striped branches. This is chapter 31. Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock, and he said to them, I've noticed your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I've worked for your father, but he's cheated me. Ready? Changing my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to do any harm. For if he said, the speckled animals will be your wages, the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said, the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. So he understands, right? Oh, this has nothing to do with sticks. Like, Laban fully intends to exploit Jacob. And so when it's clear whatever agreement he makes works out into Jacob's favor, he keeps changing the agreement. So imagine, like, it changed 10 times his wages. If this was your workplace and your boss kept changing your wages, it looks like you keep making too much, so we're going to change your commission to this. Well, we're going to drop it to this. We're going to drop it to this. And like keep changing the terms. How frustrating would that be? And so every time Laban changes the agreement, it's selfish, it's unfair, it's unreasonable. So like if, the speckled animals are yours. Okay, no, only the striped animals are yours. Only the black ones will be yours. Only the brown ones will be yours. Only the light brown ones will be yours. Only the one with a white body and a brown face, right? Like trying to find ways to like change it around so that he can't lose. And every time he changed the terms, Jacob didn't find something else to put in the water. He slowly learned to trust God. Jacob is growing. Like, because he's been trying to figure out, how can I make these flocks come out the way I want? And again, like if this is your uncle, this is infuriating. But what if there's more going on here than Laban being Laban? And that's certainly there, right? But what if God had a hand in all of this, using Laban as Laban to show Jacob that God is God? So that the frustration of each change of the terms would force Jacob into a position where he would realize, okay, I don't know what else to put in the water. Like, what if the unreasonable changes served God's purpose in helping Jacob finally realize that God has no problem adjusting to the change in terms? Jacob may not be able to make the flock produce what he wants, but God has no issue at all. Jacob, he would be forced to learn, as Laban does Laban, and Jacob tries to do Jacob, he would be forced to learn that striped branches and whatever his own clever resourcefulness may be would never keep up with Laban's ever-changing terms. He would be forced to lean on one thing. And you can imagine this, right? By the time the terms have changed 6 times and you can't keep up with it, that the last thing left for you to do is just to look up and say, God, can you just help me? Like, otherwise I'm going to be run into the ground. He would be forced to fully rely on and trust God. And it would be very, very clear to him that every time Laban changed the agreement, he didn't have to do anything except trust God again. Here's how he describes it as he talks to Rachel and Leah. God has been with me. God has not allowed Laban to do me any harm. And God has taken your father's animals, no matter what terms he tried to change it to. He has taken them and given them to me. Like, Jacob gets it. Jacob, the manipulator, is the one declaring, see, God has been with me. God has not allowed him to do me harm. God has taken those animals and given them to me. I haven't figured that out. What he originally thought was his own resourcefulness is not at all what it seemed. Like the child on the swing, or the child Darth Vader with the car remote. It's God saying, let me start that for you. God made sure Jacob was blessed. And God made sure Laban couldn't cheat him. The terms simply didn't matter. The striped branches didn't matter. There was only one thing that mattered. God had made a promise that he was going to bless Jacob, and no terms that Laban could set would be in the way of that. And so little by little, Jacob has been learning that the real key is not his resourcefulness or him manipulating or deceiving. It is God's faithfulness. And he would benefit from God's provision and from God's mercy, because his instinct is to manipulate. And God has put him in a scenario where he said, let's just pry your hands off the steering wheel and just let me do this and trust me that I've got you. Because it's never about what Jacob is trying to do. It's what God is doing. This is a valuable lesson for all of us. How many of you find yourself in a situation in your life, in your family, where you're like, if I could just find a way, right? If I come at it from this angle. And let me be clear, nothing wrong with doing your part. Nothing wrong with being wise. But it should never be to the exclusion of trusting God. See, often our approach is, I'm going to do whatever I can to make this work the way I think it should work. And when I run out of options, then I'm just going to pray and ask God to help me. That's often our approach. Like, our prayer requests weirdly tend to be a last resort instead of a first response of trusting God. The invitation for us today is to look at Jacob's story, a guy who wants to figure out a way to manipulate his circumstances like we do. Like, be honest. If you knew if I just did this or said that, it would all change. You'd be like, okay, maybe. And if we're going to be really honest, possibly even if that's not quite the truth or not quite in line with what God would say, still, that might fix it. This is how Jacob approached it. So the challenge for you and me is, what does it look like in whatever your circumstances are to just get your hands off the wheel and say, all right, God, like I've tried to manipulate this. I've tried to work this to my advantage. I have tried to fix this. And I don't have answers. Maybe your circumstances feel like Jacob's, unreasonable, unfair. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And we get to see in this story a man who is used to doing it by tilting things his way, finally letting go and just letting God do what God does. A couple other things I want you to see as we close. So we're all really familiar with sin and dysfunction spilling over into our lives and others, right? So I joked about as a parent, like, my kids will need therapy someday. You know, that was just my brokenness spilling over to them, and their kids are going to need therapy someday. That's their brokenness spilling over. And it goes on and on. And so we're really familiar with that idea of our brokenness spilling over into somebody else's life. But there's something that we get to see in the story that's actually the opposite of that. While we're very familiar with our brokenness spilling over, I want you to notice that God's blessing in Jacob's life spilled over into Laban's. See, it's not just your brokenness that spills over. It is also God's grace in your life that spills over. Equally, impactfully. So where one might lead our children to therapy, the other might lead our children to a transformed life. I want us to notice not just here's what sin does, there's the wrecking ball, but here's what God does. Because Laban, like, can we all agree? Laban did not deserve to benefit from God's blessing in Jacob's life. He just didn't. But because of Jacob's presence, Laban benefits. And as it often does, it brings us back to this reminder. It's all a redemption story, right? So the essential message of the gospel is this. It is not about what you do. It's about what God has done. When we try to earn our way into God's favor, it always, every time, will fall short. Like striped sticks in the watering trough. Like all of our attempts at righteousness, Scripture says, are like filthy rags. Or from this story, we could say are like striped sticks in the watering trough. Trying to move things toward our favor. Like, and when you strip it all back, it is not about us just attending here. It's not about communion Sundays. It's not about your membership at this church. It's not about your giving, not even about your baptism. Not that those things don't matter, but it always comes back to one essential thing. God's grace made available for you and me. And we get to see it in so many different ways, through Scripture, through Jacob's story, but also in our own lives. Jacob reached that moment where he saw it, right? Where he's like, now I see what God is doing. And here's my prayer for us. Whatever your circumstances are right now, whatever your situation, that you would be able to look attentively maybe curiously, to the grace of Jesus made available in your life. And then, maybe, just maybe, that grace will spill over into the lives around you to have the opposite effect of our sin that spills out. How transforming would that be if we at Rooted in Christ became those people? That they'd say, I don't know what's happening there. I don't know what to tell you about those people. I just know that things are better when they're around. And it's not because we offer anything, because we're messed up and broken too, right? Except we receive God's grace and we give it. That's the invitation. Receive it, give it, and live it. I'm going to invite you to stand as we sing this song.